What's happening, everybody? It's Josh Madsen here at Freeheel Live, and we're doing a public live stream number 2. So doesn't look like anybody's on quite yet, but if you get on, make sure to let me know if the volume is working okay, and if there's any technical difficulties, I will do my best to address them. But yeah, looking forward to this. This is number 2. I'm going to be doing these every first Tuesday at around 5 o'clock mountain daylight time, mountain standard time, mountain time. So be sure to put that on your calendar. The chat is going to be available for members of the YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked out the YouTube membership subscriptions, I would highly recommend that you check those out. The goal with that is to be able to add more value to the channel in terms of creating better content for all of you out there. And that's a good way for us to support the content, is essentially you become the sponsors of the content and we create it. So I've been doing live streams. I've done one public one and one for our Black level members this past month. And I've kind of started making a tradition out of showing a couple of history items. So like I said in the last public live stream, is if you're familiar with the Freeheel Life retail space in Salt Lake City, I love collecting Telemark stuff, and it's really important to have the history here all in one place. So I'm going to bring up a couple items to kind of kick things off, warm it up a little bit, and thought I'd find some fun stuff in the museum to show you all out there. So the first one is actually the match to this ski back here. And I thought this would be kind of a fun one to show you all. This is actually a gift that was given to myself when I went to Morgadal, which is where Telemark skiing, the Telemark turn began. And it's really where they call it the cradle of skiing. So it's where ski went from traveling and that sort of use in Norway to using it as sport. And Sondre Norheim is basically who is considered the father of modern skiing. And Morgadal is the town within Telemark, which is a region in Norway. And when I first visited there, I had the opportunity to go to the ski museum and also hang out with a great ski maker who is in his 90s named Osman Clive, who lived just below where Sondre Norheim's family lived in Morgadal. So anyways, we were gifted these skis. These are a smaller replica or even a child-sized ski of the skis that they were using in Morgadal. And just to point out a couple things, I won't go too deep on this, but one thing I always thought that was really cool is the tip of the ski actually indicates the ski maker. So in modern times, a lot of times we'll have the logo on the tip still, but the shape of the tip and the type of notch and the type of shape up here actually indicated who was the ski maker. And a lot of the ski makers would carry that carving knife on the side of their hip. And also some of these ornate designs on the top of the ski. Then we've got the birch binding, and it started out as a simple toe binding, and then Sondre Norheim also was considered the one that really brought the heel binding into place. This binding actually, when you ski it, which I have skied a couple times, is actually a very active binding in comparison to modern bindings. It's probably closer to most of the NTN bindings or whatnot. So historically speaking, 3-pin bindings, kind of that floppy neutral feel, is actually not historically what people were skiing on in the mid 1800s on this type of ski. So thought that was a fun one to show you. I'm sure we can do a deeper dive into that on the history side of it and all the things that were created in that area. But I really like that as well. The other thing I thought that was a kind of a fun one to show you all is this little thing. So a lot of times people bring stuff to the shop and drop it off. And I love that because we get a little glimpse into history of how things were at a certain moment in time. And this is always one of my favorites because I actually remember seeing these when I was a kid, when I first started telemark skiing in the early 90s. And that I wasn't sure what they were at first, but in the 90s, we were still mounting our cable bindings or 3-pin bindings flat to the ski. So there was no riser built into the binding. Those kind of came later, mid to late 90s. And then when you saw the G3 Target came out, they started adding the riser. And that's when we saw the little metal piece that would come up that elevated the heel when you're hiking in the backcountry. Well, when the bindings were mounted flat onto the ski, when you were hiking up, they needed a way to create sort of a stair stepper of sorts. And this is what you would see. So this is a small piece of PVC pipe and cut on an angle. So it's like what you would use for like any sort of plumbing or like a sprinkler system or whatnot. I think this is probably like 2-inch. You'll see there's kind of a slight angle to it. And then they ran a bungee cord through it. And then they also had this little heel catch. So let me see if I can kind of do that. So basically this would just kind of go around the back of around your ankles. And when you needed to climb, you'd put this under your heel. And then this part, the little brown part, would actually be where your heel would go and kind of hold it into place. And a lot of times I remember seeing guys out on the skin track, they would actually have 2 sizes of these. So now, you know, like how we have the 2 little metal posts, you'd have the tall and the short. They would also have a tall and a short, and they could just kind of put down whichever one they wanted. So I thought that was a really cool piece. Later on, you saw companies like Volet actually manufacture a product on the market like this. And you can see it's kind of basically just a production model of what I just showed you. But you got the little bungee and you got the heel thing here. It's got the slide angle. And then that just kind of looks like you got a lot of wear and tear on it over the years. But I always thought that was pretty cool. These heel climbers, and kind of what that led to was actually the built-in version that we know today, which is basically pretty commonplace in bindings, but did not exist at that point. So there's your little history lesson for the day and showing you a little bit of some of the museum items here. Today, I kind of want to keep on the topic of Telemark ski boots that I've been talking about in a lot of the videos on the channel. And lately, I've kind of been going on talking a little bit about TX Pro, which is the NTN offering from Scarpa that we carry, TX Comp, and kind of breaking these down into videos about like, is this a good boot for me? What are the features and sort of where you might be coming from. And I'm going to kind of continue on that a little bit today, talk about some of the details of boots, because there's a lot to know about boots. You know, most people, you're only buying a pair of Telemark boots every 5 or 10 years, probably, unless you're skiing, you know, 50, 100 days a year. Which is pretty normal. So I kind of want to go over some probably beginner information. But, you know, one thing I've learned over the years is that a lot of things that we think are commonplace working in Telemark all the time are not as commonplace for other people. So I thought I'd just kind of cover a couple of those things. So I wanted to first talk about Mondo sizing. A lot of times you'll walk into a retail space like ours or any shop out there, or maybe you're shopping online, and you look for a boot and you'll see Mondo size, and you'll see like 25.0 Mondo or 25 or 26.5 Mondo. So what is Mondo sizing? So because there's different sizing in Europe, in the US, all over the world, the ski industry came together at some point and created Mondo sizing, basically to make a universal system that we could all use for ski boot sizing. So Mondo sizing is essentially just the measurement of your foot from the heel to the big toe in centimeters. So I wear a 27.0 Mondo, which is essentially 27 centimeters of my foot. Now, that's just a one-dimensional way of looking at the foot. It doesn't take into account some of the other things that we want to look at, but that's the best place to start. So I'll try to remember to put a link to our sizing video, or you can go onto the channel about how to size Telemark boots. We've got a couple videos there about how to do it. But essentially the easiest way to do it is put a piece of masking tape on the floor, a piece of paper, mark your heel, mark your toe, grab the piece of paper or that tape and put a ruler on it with metric, figure it out. Or I guess, you could always do it in imperial system and then figure out the measurement conversion from inches to metric. So that's a good place to start. If you don't know your boot size, try to figure that out. Now, I will talk about in Scarpa boots because that's what we sell. I've talked about this over and over and over. There's no half size. Okay. There is a half size in the liner, but there's only one shell size per half and whole. So in Scarpa, you're going to see a 26.5 and a 27.0 is one boot, identical in the shell. Now the liner, the part that goes inside of it, is 3 millimeters different at the very, very beginning when it's brand new. So keep that in mind, because sometimes once you heat mold a liner, for instance, I wear a 27.0 usually is what I say. A 26.5 works great for me. If I heat mold it, that 3 millimeters goes away. It molds to my foot. I'm good to go. So whether you pack out the liner or heat mold the liner, that half size, it's not too different in the liner where you couldn't go the half size and just heat mold it out and make it into the whole size. So hopefully that makes sense. There also is a video about that, sort of the myth of half and whole sizes in Scarpa boots. We don't carry the other two brands of boots, but I will just say, like, Crispy is the same as Scarpa, and Scott, if you have those boots, Scott boots are opposite. So they start on the whole size. 27.0 and 27.5 is actually the same boot in Scott. And if you go back to when Black Diamond was making boots, that's also the case. Starts on the whole size, whereas Scarpa starts on the half size. So if that doesn't make sense, go check out that video about half and whole size in Scarpa, and hopefully that'll help you out. Mondo sizing is super important. I wanted to talk about kind of one of the myths that's sort of been perpetuated over time. I don't know, maybe it's not a myth. I think it's just, like I said, some people aren't buying Telemark boots regularly every year. And so things may change over time. Okay. And one of the things, if you've been a telemarketer for a long time, that you'll always hear is Scarpa boots are narrow, Garmont boots are wide. That's probably the most classic one, because when it was really at the heyday, when Garmont and Scarpa Garmont had more market share in North America and was really there with Scarpa, you always heard that. Well, I have a wide foot, so I wear Garmont. Or I have a narrow foot, I wear Scarpa. So I thought I'd just point out that this is a fantastic piece of history. We call it the Bumblebee for obvious reasons. This is the Scarpa T1. Now, this era of Scarpa, when this whole notion of narrow versus wide started, this was true because this boot this way was narrower than a Garmont boot. So T-Race, T1, T2, all of this era basically was what we call 100 millimeter last. So it's the measurement, sort of the width. Just think of it simply as the width. So just so we have the lingo correctly, like a last is what, like a shoemaker or a boot maker, it's the solid piece that they mold the shape of the foot to, essentially. So like I said, the Mondo size is dimensional one way. The width, the last is really important because we want to know wide or narrow or these things. And so that's where you sort of got this. But I wanted to point out that this era of Scarpa, yes, was narrow in comparison to Black Diamond boots or Garmont boots. Garmont became Scott later on. But what happened historically is that it flip-flopped, okay? So as we moved, let's see, I got a lot of boots. So right here, for instance, this is the Scarpa T2 Eco. There was a boot before this called the Scarpa T2X that was red, 3-buckle boot. It's basically, it replaced the T2 Eco, basically replaced this early 2000s, mid 2000s T2, which is this 2-buckle boot. This, I believe, still is 100 last across this. As it transitioned to the T2X, T2 Eco, you basically, whoops, sorry, I moved the camera, guys. This actually moved to a 102 millimeter last, okay? So this build of the T2 Eco is very similar, if not the same, to the NTN boot, the TX Pro, which I've been talking a lot about on the channel. This is also a 102 millimeter last in terms of the width. Actually, you can see that Mondo size right there, 27.0 right there. So in terms of historical value, I just want to point out that this era of Scarpa, yes, 100 millimeters. This era of Scarpa is 102 millimeters, which actually is a flip-flop, because when Scott, the company, not the person, bought Garmont and acquired all the molds, they actually started producing a narrower boot that was closer to the 100 millimeter last of early Scarpa. So like a NTN boot in Scott, for instance, is closer to 100 millimeters. NTN boot in Scarpa is 102 millimeters. And that's kind of your last, your conversation about lasts and what they are. But I thought that would be a good thing to bring up, because oftentimes as people are starting to move to a new NTN boot, for instance, they're coming from Scarpa, they're coming from like this era, or they're coming from this era, which is very, very common. So despite people out there that maybe have kept up on boots, there's a lot of folks that are skiing these boots because maybe they ski 15 days a year and these boots are in classic good shape. So just keep that in mind, that if you're coming from Scarpa to Scarpa, you actually are probably going to end up in a wider boot. Even if you go to like a T2 Eco, this is the T4, same thing. Kind of a good distinguishing, well, I don't know if it's the best. Yeah, kind of the shape's different too. You can kind of see it here. Like it's got the torsion bar and kind of that different bottom. It's kind of similar on this. I think they call it, yeah, torsion frame. This sort of has the frame, but it's definitely like a different style of bottom. So just kind of for reference. Anyways, it changed at some point. So that's really important to kind of know as you're getting into new boots, especially since we're moving in. There is no T1, there's no T race. We're getting into TX Pro. We're getting into TX Comp for NTN stuff. So it's just important to kind of understand that and what it is, and wanted to point that out for you. And then we kind of cover the last. That's just the width of the foot. So you get your Mondo measurement. The last is interesting in boots, because right now in 2023, you have 3 boot manufacturers, and I would say 2 boot manufacturers and 1 sort of dead boot manufacturer. The dead one I would say is Scott. They acquired Garmont many years ago, and basically my belief from sort of looking at it from the inside of a business perspective is once those boots run out, you're probably not going to have Scott Telemark boots any longer. That's I'm not totally sure, but pretty good chance. So we could be down to 2 manufacturers. So the issue, if you're coming from alpine skiing, where you can look at a wall of boots and you're like, yeah, I'm a 100 last, I'm a 98 last, I want a performance fit, I want a half size, blah, blah. I mean, you get the idea. In NTN, for instance, you're looking at maybe 5 options. Maybe you could make the argument that there's half a dozen options with the used market, some boots that aren't made any longer. But the reason I've gone so deep with Scarpa, and that's all we sell, is I feel like it's the best fitting boot. And honestly, I think it's the best made boot on the market. And that's pretty much it. I want us to sell the best product here. So we sell Scarpa. The liner's better right off the bat. I don't have that. Got too many boots around me. I just think it's an overall better boot, better liner, better buckles, better plastic. Overall, it's just great. So, but the thing is that 102 last fits more people, and you can make up for that last with some simple boot fitting. The P-backs of the boot doesn't allow you to fit as intricately as an Alpine boot fit, but we can do the heat mold. We can get some good insoles in there, and you can kind of tweak it out that way. Overall, it works for the majority of people. I've been selling Scarpa boots for almost 9 years now. That 102 last works really, really well, even if you're coming from the 100 last and the old Scarpa stuff. I just think that's a really good one. So got about 10 minutes. I kind of wanted to go over sort of just the basic use of each boot that we carry in the Scarpa lineup. Now we carry everything from 75 millimeter all the way through the NTN product. I'm just going to give you kind of a brief overview of how I look at these things and maybe why you may want this boot. You can always call us or email us at customerservice@freeheellife.com, and we can set up a consultation call if you're looking to buy boots. We're fully stocked right now, and we'd love to help you out. Really important to kind of know what you're getting into. So the Scarpa lineup in a quick overview, let's go through this. So T4, which is a 2-buckle low cuff boot. It's now got a moldable liner, which I think is awesome. It's a simple 75 millimeter boot. Now, application of this boot for the majority of people. We tend to call this rugged touring these days. This is great. Maybe you got a scaled ski setup. You like walking around the woods, simple telemark turns. You're rolling hill terrain and whatnot. This is a great boot. Now, I will say, if you have the ability to have a quiver of boots, I love it. Sometimes you can't do that. You own one boot, so you need to kind of pick the majority of what you're doing and sort of get the best boot for that. And that's totally cool as well. So if I only could choose one boot that I needed and I was going to choose this boot, I'm probably in an area like that. Midwest United States, maybe some East Coast. Maybe I don't. So rolling terrain where I'm going to make some telemark turns, but I'm really looking at maybe what people call in some parts of the country ski touring, even though in Utah, ski touring kind of takes on a different idea set. Might be steeper, setting deep skin tracks, and you're really looking at charging hard lines, couloirs, and whatnot. Can you ski that on this? Absolutely. Are there better boots for the application? In my opinion, I think so. But again, it's subjective. If you like a low cuff boot and 2 buckles, this is an awesome option. For me that have multiple boots, I like this. If I'm going out to walk in the woods, just kind of cruise around, like I said, maybe some lighter ski. Like last year I was touring on NTN setup TX Pro, but I skied like a shorter 174 Protector, one of our skis, and loved it. And honestly, this might be kind of a fun setup with like a 3-pin binding or something like that. So there's that one. Moving on, T2 Eco, next step up. If you're coming from a T2 already, this is nice 3-buckle boot. It's probably a 90 flex rating. It's quite a bit softer, but if you're not looking for an aggressive boot and maybe you're coming from like old era T2, this is actually quite the upgrade. So if you're going to stick in the 75 millimeter family and you want something that's got a little bit better function, I think this is a great boot. Okay. It's got a heat moldable liner, 3 buckles. I love the instep strap, which the T4 doesn't have because there's not enough space for it. But I like that just because it really sucks your foot down into the heel pocket. And it's just a great all-around softer boot. Also, I use this kind of in a similar fashion with the T4. Rolling terrain, maybe would take it to the resort. I'm not going to, me personally, not going to ski this boot too often. But when I do, it's sort of a lighter scenario, and I want to have my boots on for a long time. I guess all my Telemark boots are comfortable, so I'm going to keep them on for a long time. But this has just got a little more meat to it. but really not a stiff boot. So that's kind of where I land at that. Now, if you've got a massive foot and you don't need a stiff boot, this goes up to Mondo 32, which unfortunately NTN only goes to size 30 in Mondo. It's kind of backwards, whole nother topic to talk about, but this goes up to size 32, which is very important because if you need a boot and you can stay in the 75 millimeter realm, this is it. Pairs nicely with all cable bindings, with tour mode, non-tour mode. Probably could ski it with a 3-pin, might be a little too much boot for it, in my personal opinion, unless you're not planning on doing a ton of downhill turns, which is really what a telemark turn is. It's a downhill Nordic technique. 3-pin, I'd probably go more T4. That's kind of where I'm at with that. There's a women's version of the T2 Eco. Same features, 3 buckles, heat moldable liner, awesome 75 millimeter boot. Women's boots from Scarpa basically they usually have a little bit lower area for the calf because women's calves tend to be lower. And so they try to address that with the liner and just the cuff in general. So other than that, same type of boot, same type of scenario. Works really well. Oh, also, these 2 boots, good application for kids telemark. Obviously, kids are growing a lot. We do kids rentals, but T2s, especially these are actually some of our kids rentals. These work great for kids because they're soft, easy to flex. You don't have to be very heavy, and works really well. All right, so that's basically, you got T4, T2 Eco, T2 Women's Eco. Then we get into the boots I've been talking a lot about on the channel, and that's where we get to TX Pro. By far, the boot that is sold the most over the last 9 years that we've been here, okay? If you want to know if this is a good boot, you can go, there's a public video. If you're not a member of the channel yet, go check it out. Is TX Pro the right boot for me? There's also one about TX Comp, which is the stiffer boot, which I'm not going to show. Actually, I don't have one out here, but same exact boot. If you are a member of the channel already, I did a 20-minute deep dive into this boot versus TX Comp. And those are the types of videos I'm doing for members these days. It's just going way deeper than I would in something like this to help you out. So TX Pro, it's got tech toe, so you have the availability of doing a tech toe NTM binding, 4-buckle boot, liner, connects here instead of the 75 millimeter toe. Just a great boot. Honestly, I ski this boot more than I ski any other boot and love it. Able to get out of it what I need. I'm 6 foot. I'm like 205. Ski pretty aggressively, but I've really learned to love this boot and sort of the versatility of it. And let's see. Kind of close it out. I've got the women's TX Pro. Same thing, 4-buckle boot. And basically just, oh, thanks, Jeff. Welcome. So women's TX Pro, same thing, kind of has that lower cuff in the back. Other than that, similar flex. We got a 110 flex, men and women's. This is a great boot. In terms of women's specific boots, this is it. Other than if you're staying in 75 millimeter, you got T2 Eco, or you've got TX Pro women's. These are the only 2 women's specific boots that exist in the new market. There was a T1 women's boot at some point, which was a 4-buckle 75 millimeter, which you can find it out there. It does exist. It's either all white and gray and silver, or there was a silver and green, kind of neon green version as well. And it's good. It's great. It's kind of a similar build to this, a little bit later era than the Bumblebee, but that's something good as well. Like I said, boots are a big purchase. We want to be able to walk you through it, really dial you in. If you have the ability to have more than one boot, I mean, that opens up so many options in terms of, you've got a quiver of boots, like a quiver of skis. I know how it is. It's like you spend all your money on gear and whatnot. But if you only have one boot option, that's where I'm doing all these videos to sort of just give you the lay of the land. What type of boot do I need? One thing you'll learn about my channel and how I talk about things is really try to focus on what Telemark is. So Telemark is a Nordic downhill technique. So technically, anytime you have a free heel, you can make a Telemark turn and be a Telemark skier. All right. What we try to do when we talk about boots and equipment is, where are you going to make Telemark turns? Okay. Walking is not Telemark by definition. You know, it's touring, it's walking. It's the other part of the Nordic discipline is walking. And what we want to do is make sure you have the right boot that accommodates that, but also accommodates downhill. Because a lot of times, all of these boots, they're getting used inbounds as much as they're getting used out of bounds. And that's why it's really, really important for us to dial you in. So, like I said, latest videos that I did on the channel, free videos, there's actually quite a bit. I've been putting shorts up, which is sort of like reels on Instagram. So you can check those out. I put up TX Pro, if that's the right boot, a basic overview of TX Pro, TX Comp. And like I said, membership videos, I just dropped a 20-minute deep dive into TX Pro versus TX Comp. And there's different levels of the membership. So there's green level, you're going to get some behind the scenes stuff. I'm scoping out your comments. So if you're a green level member, I'll always be checking out your comments and answering those first. There's blue level, which gives you more access to specific videos that are blue level. And then the black level is the highest level. So like I said, I would love for you to check the memberships out. If you found value in this live stream today, this is the type of stuff I'm doing every single day, every single week on the Freeheel Life channel. I've been a Telemark skier. I think this is my 30th year anniversary. Actually, I started in 1993. That's all I've done since then. And we can kind of get into my background some other time, but I absolutely love the Telemark turn. And me and my crew here at Freeheel Life in Salt Lake City, our mission is to preserve, protect, and promote Telemark skiing. So if you find value in the videos we're doing, feel free to look at the memberships and see if that's a good fit for you, and look forward to connecting with you in the future. If you need to get a hold of us about boots and you need to buy boots, hit us up, customer service at freeheellife.com. Give us a day or two to get back to you, just because there's only a couple of us here right now, and we would love to help you out. So I guess we'll see you next public live stream is going to be first Tuesday of October. And then just remember that if you are a black level member, there's a specific live stream that's an hour long that's going to happen on I believe the last Tuesday of each month. So anyway, scope that out. I hope you guys are having a great week out there. And until next time, spread Telemark always. Peace out.